to the GAB Talks by the Independent Press Award. I'm your hostess, Gabby Olzak. Today, we will be speaking with Ayn Cates Sullivan, the very accomplished award-winning author, speaker, publisher, and seminar leader. Her novel, Nimue, Freeing Merlin, is the winner of the 2022 Independent Press Award for Paranormal Romance. Her 17 books have garnered numerous literary awards. She has become a best-selling author on Amazon, The Wall Street Journal, and USA Today. Anne has written an array of fascinating works that include the Sparkle Fairy Tale series of picture books for children, A Story of Becoming, which is a best-selling fable, and Legends of the Grail, story of Celtic goddesses. Truly a spiritual inspiration. Anne has over 2.6 million listeners on her podcast. She earned a BA at Hollins University, an MFA from Columbia, and a doctorate from King's College in London. Anne joins us today from her home in Charlottesville, Virginia. Congratulations, Anne. It's an honor to speak with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here and talk about my favorite thing, literature.
Yes, I see. Well, I understand that you've actually been writing nearly your entire life. And in fact, you taught yourself to read and write when you were 4 years old. That's amazing. And on top of that, creative blood runs in your veins. I've heard you say that your father is a writer and your mom a painter. And it seems, Anne, that you've always known your life purpose. I want to hear how your Nana, because I also have a Nana or had a Nana, inspired you.
Nana. So this is kind of interesting. I did come up and announce to my parents, I think I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, that I had been put on earth to be a mystic poet. And they said, well, that's good. How are you going to make a living? But they seemed to like they approved.
I bet.
And Nana was great. That's my mom's mom. And Nana was a storyteller. So we actually have a farm in the family that was given as a land grant in 1668. And so she had the stories of the kings, of the foresters, who were the knights of Forest of Bamborough Castle. You can see it on Last Kingdom. There's a whole TV show made about it. But at that time, that was just in my imagination. And I loved thinking about Merlin and Hawthorn and Nimue and all these characters, the ladies of the lake. She was my favorite always. And they would come to life in my mind. And she would really encourage that. I think her mother also, Gladys was the name of my grandmother, and then her mother was also a Gladys Rivers. And there was something wonderful about that oral storytelling. I just took it to the next level because I could, in this generation, I could write it down and share it with more people.
And that you did. And before we delve into Nimue, am I pronouncing it correctly, Anne?
It looks like it's actually Nimue.
Nimue.
It doesn't look like Nimue, but it's a Cornish name. So of course they pronounce things a little differently, but it's Nimue.
And that does actually mean the Lady of the Lake, who was the ruler of Avalon in the Arthurian legend, correct?
She was one of the 9 ladies of the lake.
Okay, and you said that was one of your favorites. So before we delve into Nimue, tell us about the Legends of the Grail series and why you chose to focus on stories of goddesses.
Well, this is sort of fun. Sometimes it's just kismet. So because Nana told me all kinds of stories about Bamborough Castle and our relatives that live in Britain, I applied to King's College London and was accepted, given an overseas research award to go and study my ancestry. I love this.
Wow.
And, so they told me if I studied Lady Gregory, I was accepted, but they said if I studied Lady Gregory, I would get the overseas research award because they needed more feminine literature. So I agreed, and which meant that I wound up in Ireland, and I became obsessed. From a child, I was obsessed with the stories of the Holy Grail or the Fairy Grail. But in Ireland, that was the first time I ran into these Celtic goddesses that Lady Isabella Augusta Gregory was writing about in Kings and Fighting Men and some of her other books, Cuchulainn of Morhavna. we won't know them so much in our culture, but I'm wandering around. I thought I was going to be some famous museum, and I'm wandering around waving down guys driving on tractors to try to find these places. But it was very remote in Galway in the west of Ireland, and magical. Really, it was, I opened my eyes up to this new culture, this where the women and the men lived in harmony, and they knew that the women would come together with the masculine, and together they created life, and their union made all life possible on the earth. And I still think that they had something going on there.
Sure, but now why the goddesses? Tell us about the importance of that, especially during these challenging times. Why is that important?
Well, in many different levels, but I'll back it up to the way that it came to me, because first I went to, it's very famous, it's called the Chalice Well in Glastonbury, England, and it's a pilgrimage place to go. And it was actually the first church was established there by Joseph of Arimathea, but it's also known as the goddess stronghold, and it's been a place for the goddesses for thousands and thousands of years. So when I went, I actually had a kind of spiritual encounter with the Lady of the Lake. I became really curious about her. So to me, I was an academic and I was smart, but I felt something was missing. Like I wanted to find my feminine side, because this culture, I mean, we're getting better, but it hasn't always been encouraged. And I wanted to find the mother. What's the mother? And as I thought about it, it seemed to me that the knights of the Holy Grail were questing for the goddess who had really gone missing. And this was the challenge with Christianity, is because at that time, the patriarchal religions were coming on board and the matriarchal were disappearing. And it seems to me that maybe as we move forward, we need a little both. We need the feminine and the masculine dancing together. So to me, it was my quest for the Grail. As you go into Ireland, the Holy Grail quest is actually more for the cup of Christ. And I write about some of that in Heroine's Babylon. But in Legends of the Grail, Stories of Celtic Goddesses, these are really fairy Grail stories, and they're much more ancient. Some of them are 10,000 years old. The story of the Cailleach is 10,000 years old. Wow. And this is about going back and understanding the true wisdom of the feminine that's the earth speaking. I fell in love with the Cailleach. Did that answer the question?
Yes, it definitely did. Now, Nimue, Freeing Merlin, is actually the third book in the Legends of the Grail series, but yet it can be read alone as a standalone. Your protagonist, Nina, is a teenager, actually. Is that correct? In Manhattan, and she travels back in time. So tell us about, and I always think that's fascinating. I'm a big time traveler buff. That's always wonderful to read about. Tell us about Nina's journey, who she becomes, and her quest.
So yes, Nina's 17, and she's going through a life change. There's a little bit of autobiography in there, but she's going from New York to England because her father has died and her mother wants to go home. And so she's going back to find her roots. And 17 is an interesting age, it's just that pivotal time. But
yes, I have one of those. Yeah.
Right. So she goes back in time, and what happens is she's grieving, but she meets this healer, and the healer starts to explain things to her that are pretty deep and a little out there. And she actually gets kidnapped by Morgan Le Fay. I call her Morgan in the book. And what from a more autobiographical point of view, when you get inspired by these stories, in a way you do get kidnapped by the fairies. It was like, you get super excited about the potentials of what could go on here. Initially, with somebody like Morgan, if you take Morgan to the ancient goddess of the sea, she's a very different character, or as the Morrigu, she's a very different character. She's a triple goddess in that sense. than Morgan Le Fay, who's the evil sister of Arthur. And I wasn't sure when I was writing the book if Morgan was good or not. That's part of the tension of the story. I'm not going to tell you what the truth is.
No spoilers.
Right, no spoiler alerts there, but I really felt that tension in my own psyche writing the book. I think that's what I loved most about writing the book. And Nina is feeling this tension. Am I good or am I bad or am I both, or what's the truth? And is the goddess a good thing? Or, so she's asking a lot of deep questions.
This internal struggle that we all have, actually.
There you go.
Nimue has a mixed reputation. Why did you choose this person?
Wow. So right on that. So Nimue, actually, I didn't realize, I think until the book was published, that there was this TV show about this evil Nimue. I was like, oh, but so to me, so Caitlin Matthews is a scholar at Oxford, or Oxford scholar, and she's written quite a lot about the Grail goddesses, the fairy Grail, and their roots and origins. So, and of course, the ladies of the lake have appeared over time in many, many different guises. But what we mostly know about the Lady of the Lake is that she's mysterious. You see her with her hand coming up, giving Arthur the Excalibur, right? So she's always mysterious and magical, right? So I was fascinated by that. And then when I started learning about the 9 faces, or the 9 embodiments of the Lady of the Lake, and they all have different names. So depending on who you talk to, there's a different name for them. But what's really lovely about Nimue is that in some guises, she's the twin flame of Merlin. She's the deep love of Merlin. And I thought, well, Merlin would only really fall in love with a woman if she was very interesting, right?
Yeah.
So I started, as I was working with her character, I was thinking, gosh, she probably is the twin flame of Merlin, because she has that same tension that he has. In some tales, he was born of the Cambion. He was born of, his father was the devil, and his mother was a saintly woman. And so these struggles between the two. And so Nimue also has this, and some versions, the version I went with is that she's the daughter of the, in quote, virgin Diana, the huntress. And she's smuggled into Avalon because the goddess temples are falling, and she wants her daughter to be able to truly live her life. And she's cared for by these Atlantean priestesses. And of course, I loved when Nina goes back in time, and then it's like doing a past life regression. Suddenly she's somebody else.
Right. That's really fun. So what is that? Why it was important for her to go on this quest to free Merlin?
Well, I think what happens, there's a tension in the story. She's aware of the part of herself that's good. And when she's faced, I'll tell you something about that. I don't think it's a spoiler alert, but when she's at Camelot, Nimue was meant to be to replace Merlin at Camelot as the counselor of Arthur. But it's at the time when unfortunately Camelot is crumbling. They haven't been able to find the goddess, and there's a trick in the book as to whether or not Nimue might know where the Holy Grail is, right? So you have to go into the book to find that out, and what the Holy Grail is, right? That's the big question. What is the Holy Grail?
Always.
So in some of the versions of, because I went through the Welsh and the French and the German, all kinds of different versions of the Grail. And in some of the Grail versions, she's beheaded by Balin, who does not know how to wield his sword correctly. And as I was working with her character, I was like, well, there really are 2 Nimues. There's one that is kind of the evil witch, and there's the other part that really is this beautiful, mysterious, powerful woman. And what happens if they go into battle with each other, right? Yeah. And so that she splits at that moment. She splits into 2 people, and the story is about learning how to reconcile those 2 so they can come back together again. So,
well, that actually brings me to my next question. I have heard you say that it's important to know your in world and your external world. Tell us the meaning of that.
Well, sometimes I divide it up into Joseph Campbell and the hero's quest, the individuation process, which we know the Knights of the Round Table are on their hero's quest. But there's also, I think, a heroine's quest, and it's not gender-based. It's just a different direction. Are you external or internal? The heroine's quest to me is more internal, and so you're going inside to find out your wholeness. What is your wholeness? I believe that you achieve the Holy Grail when you found all your broken parts and you've put them back together in the shape of your own Grail. And so that's what the heroine's quest is about being brave enough to go in and find your truth, find your authenticity, and find out, basically there are no bad parts. They're all there for a reason.
Right. And once we discover that, that'll really help us to be our whole person and to achieve whatever we want to achieve. I think that's many of the messages that you share with your podcast listeners and your readers. Is that right, Ann?
My quest from early on was this quest for the Grail, the quest for wholeness, in many, many different traditions. If you listen to Wisdom of the Ages, which is on the Superpower Network, you'll hear from the yogic perspective, from the Tibetan perspective, from the Christian perspective, from the Jewish, so we have looked at this from many, many different angles. It's really fascinating. I have so much fun doing it.
You seem like you're having a lot of fun. So tell us about the visualizations and the practices in the book. How does this help the readers?
Well, again, this is the heroine's quest. So this is going inwards to connect to a deity, or inwards to connect to a guide. And I love the work of Carl Jung and the active imagination. And I feel when we go inside and we work with our imagination in this way, that really pretty fantastic things can happen. So in a lot of my practices and visualizations, there might be a tree that you can go into, so you can start consciously dreaming. And I feel this is important, especially in this time that we're in right now. That it was just thunder and lightning. I don't know if you heard that, but anyway, it was in the time that we're living in right now, that when we can dream with our guides, the ones that we know love us, whoever that might be, whether it's Divine Mother is my main guide, but I go in, I work with Divine Mother, and then she appears as many different aspects. And when I work with those different characters, I understand something more about myself, who I am and who I'm not, and also more about the world at large, and how I believe we can come together as a unified force of love. We can actually overcome this divide that we're in, but we have to do it within ourselves.
Absolutely. And as far as aspiring writers in this genre, they have to do a lot of those exercises that you just spoke of, certainly. What kind of advice can you offer them?
Aspiring writers,
particularly in this genre, because you obviously have done quite a bit of research as far as travel, intellectually studying. What can you offer them? Should they be intimidated by this genre if it fascinates them and they want to write about it?
That's a really good question. Should you be intimidated by it? It's a big field.
It is a big field.
It's maybe not bad to be intimidated by it, but it's also very rich. It's worth the quest. And I still quest every year. Every year, if I can, I quest somewhere. I go to find another piece or do another part of this. What I would say is, if you're a writer and you really are a writer, like you're not writing because you want to be famous, but you're writing because there's something that lives in your heart that
It's
really
your calling.
needs to be expressed. It's your calling. That's it. Exactly. It's your calling.
Yeah.
I didn't have any choice. It was like I had my 25th grandmother was Eleanor of Aquitaine, who made the Grail stories famous. So
wow.
the ancestors, made me do it. No, but we respond to the call of our soul, and whatever that is in you, whether it's from the ancestors, from your future self calling you forward. And I think one thing that's wonderful about being a writer is half of the, I tend to do factual stuff, and then I do fantasy, and I combine them. So you want to do your research So, I mean, to me, research just gives it some structure, some historical perspective. It gives it some depth. And then once you have that container, then you can just really go wild with it. And that's the fun part. I love the active imagination part. Yeah.
So what is your new quest now, Anne? What are you working on?
I have a series of children's books that are out. There's one that's coming out called Whisper Angel that should be out soon. And another one that just came out called Iala Mother Swan, which is about a boy who flies into the other world on a swan to remember the songs of his soul. So I love that.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
And in this series, I'm not sure when it's going to be out. It's called Riddles of the Ancestors, and it's sort of the next step. So each of these books, if you like Irish mythology, you might like Legends of the Grail. If you're more into the Welsh, you might like Heroine's Babylon. Those are short stories. Nimue is the first full-length novel, and then the one that follows is also Riddle of the Ancestors. So there, Morgan Le Fay is the character that's pretty consistent. Nimue makes an appearance too. So
they're all sort of interconnected, but yet you can read them on their own.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So lastly, Anne, how can we find out more about you?
Well, you can go on my website, AynCatesSullivan.com. It's AYN. So that gives you a little hint there. And you can listen to my podcast, Wisdom of the Ages. You can find me on infinitelightpublishing.com. And I've got a new podcast I just started doing called Messages of Infinite Light, which is for the time that we're moving into as we achieve our grail, as we achieve our wholeness, and we walk into this new unified time together.
Look forward to hearing that and to looking on your website, hearing some more podcasts. And thank you so much for joining us today. This is Gabby Olzak of the GAB Talks. Until next time, keep on reading.